My name is Rachel, I'm 28, and I thought my sister Emily hated me for missing her wedding. What I discovered 3 months later made me realize she never wanted me there in the first place. When those viral photos surfaced, showing her husband Marcus yanking her hair at their reception, everything clicked into place. The bruises I'd noticed during our last coffee date, her sudden distance, the way she flinched when he called during our conversations, it all made horrifying sense. But what happened next changed our family forever, and I'm still processing how one night of justice served cold could destroy and rebuild everything we thought we knew about loyalty, protection, and the price of silence. Before I dive into this wild ride, I need to know, where are you watching from tonight? If stories about family drama and unexpected justice get your heart racing like mine, smash that like button. And definitely subscribe, because trust me, you're going to want to hear how this sister revenge story unfolds. The twists coming up will blow your mind. 6 months before Emily's wedding, our relationship started shifting in ways I couldn't understand. We'd always been close. Emily was 3 years younger, but we shared everything. She was my built-in best friend, my shopping companion, my late-night phone call when life got messy. When she started dating Marcus 2 years earlier, I was genuinely happy for her. He seemed charming, successful in his marketing career, and made her laugh in ways I hadn't seen since her college boyfriend broke her heart. But something changed around Christmas last year. Emily became distant, canceling our weekly sister dinners with vague excuses about being busy with wedding planning. When we did spend time together, she seemed jumpy, constantly checking her phone, and would shut down conversations the moment I asked about wedding details. I attributed it to pre-wedding stress planning. A celebration for 200 people would make anyone anxious. The first real red flag appeared during what should have been a joyful moment. Emily had asked me to be her maid of honor 8 months before the wedding, and we'd spent hours scrolling through Pinterest boards dreaming about her perfect day. Then, out of nowhere, she called me on a Tuesday evening in February, her voice shaky and distant. "Rachel, I need to talk to you about something," she started, and my stomach immediately dropped. "I've been thinking about the wedding party, and Marcus feels like it should be more intimate. Just family, you know. His sister is going to be matron of honor, and I think it makes sense to keep things balanced." I sat in stunned silence in my apartment kitchen, stirring a cup of tea that suddenly tasted like cardboard. I don't understand. We've been planning this together for months. You literally have my bridesmaid dress hanging in your closet right now." But Marcus makes some really good points about keeping the wedding party small. "You'll still be there, obviously. You're my sister." But even as she said it, her voice lacked conviction, like she was reading from a script someone else had written. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Emily offering increasingly weak explanations that made no sense. Marcus's family was huge. He had 3 brothers and 2 sisters, plus numerous cousins. The idea that adding me would somehow throw off the balance was ridiculous. But what hurt most wasn't the demotion itself, it was the way Emily delivered it. Gone was my confident, decisive sister who never let anyone push her around. In her place was someone who sounded defeated, almost robotic. Over the next few weeks, I tried to maintain our relationship despite the sting of being demoted. I offered to help with wedding planning in other ways, suggested we go dress shopping for her rehearsal dinner outfit, even volunteered to organize her bachelorette party. Each suggestion was met with polite deflection. "Marcus's sister is handling the bachelorette," or "We've got the planning under control, but thanks." The final blow came 6 weeks before the wedding. Emily and I were having coffee at our usual spot, a little cafe near her apartment where we'd been meeting for years. I noticed immediately that something was off. She wore a turtleneck despite the warm May weather, and when she reached across the table for her sugar packet, I caught a glimpse of what looked like fingerprint bruises around her wrist. When I asked if she was okay, she yanked her sleeve down quickly and changed the subject. "Actually, Rachel, there's something I need to tell you." Her hands trembled as she wrapped them around her coffee mug. "The wedding venue had a mix-up with the guest count. They overbooked, and we have to cut the list down significantly. Family, only immediate family." My blood turned cold. "Emily, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," She couldn't meet my eyes. I'm saying that Marcus and I decided to keep it really small. Just parents, grandparents, his siblings. That's it. Are you uninviting me to your wedding? The words came out louder than I intended, causing other cafe patrons to glance our way. Emily's face crumpled, but she nodded. It's not personal, Rachel. It's just complicated right now. I stared at my sister, this stranger wearing Emily's face, and realized that something was fundamentally wrong. The Emily I knew would never uninvite her only sibling to the most important day of her life. The Emily I knew would fight tooth and nail for what she wanted, and she'd wanted me there from the very beginning. "This is Marcus, isn't it?" I asked quietly. "He's the one making these decisions." Emily's reaction was immediate and telling. Her face went pale, and she glanced around nervously like she was afraid he might be watching. "Don't," she whispered. "Please, Rachel, just don't. Accept this, okay?" For me, that was the last real conversation we had before her wedding day. Emily stopped answering my calls, responding to texts with short, cold responses, and effectively cut me out of her life during what should have been one of our closest moments as sisters. I was heartbroken, confused, and increasingly worried about what Marcus was doing to her behind closed doors. 3 months after Emily's wedding, I was scrolling through social media during my lunch break when my world exploded. A friend from high school had shared a post in a private Facebook group called Wedding Photographer Horror Stories, and there, in shocking clarity, was my sister's reception. The photos were taken by a guest, not the official photographer, which explained why they weren't the carefully curated images Emily had posted on her own social media. These were raw, unfiltered moments captured when people thought no one was watching. And what they showed made my stomach turn. The first image showed Marcus with his hand tangled in Emily's hair, yanking her head back while she smiled desperately at someone off camera. Her eyes were wide with what I now recognized as fear, not joy. The second photo caught him squeezing her arms so tightly that his knuckles were white, while Emily's face showed a flash of pain she was trying to hide. The third image was the worst. Marcus had his hand wrapped around the back of her neck in what looked like a romantic gesture from a distance, but up close you could see Emily's expression of genuine terror. The Facebook post had already been shared over 3,000 times with comments ranging from outrage to disbelief. "Someone needs to check on this bride," wrote one user. "This is abuse happening in real time," commented another. "Why didn't anyone stop this?" demanded a third. My hands shook as I read through the hundreds of comments. People were tagging local domestic violence organizations, sharing resources, and expressing genuine concern for Emily's well-being. But what struck me most was how many commenters mentioned that they'd witnessed similar behavior at other weddings but hadn't known how to intervene in the moment. The photographer who'd originally shared the images in the private group had written a lengthy caption explaining her dilemma. She'd been hired to cover a different wedding at the same venue and had accidentally captured these moments while photographing the outdoor cocktail hour. She'd wrestled with whether to share them, ultimately deciding that Emily's safety was more important than privacy concerns. I immediately tried calling Emily, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I sent text after text asking if she was safe, begging her to call me, telling her I loved her no matter what. Nothing. I tried calling her work, but her assistant said she'd taken indefinite personal leave. Even her social media had gone dark, no posts, no activity, no signs of life. Panic set in as I realized my sister had effectively disappeared. The viral photos were spreading across multiple platforms now picked up by local news stations and domestic violence awareness pages. Find Emily started trending on Twitter with thousands of people expressing concern and sharing resources for abuse survivors. That evening I drove to Emily and Marcus's house, a sprawling suburban home that had always felt cold and unwelcoming to me. The windows were dark, both cars were gone, and when I knocked on the door, silence echoed back. Neighbors I spoke with said they hadn't seen either of them in several days, which only heightened my anxiety. I spent that night researching everything I could about Marcus Davidson, my sister's husband who had somehow convinced her to cut her own family out of their wedding. What I found painted a disturbing picture of a man who collected women like trophies and discarded them when they no longer served his purposes. His social media presence was carefully curated, showing only the highlights of his relationship with Emily, romantic dinners, vacation photos, engagement announcements. But when I dug deeper into his past relationships, a pattern emerged. His ex-girlfriend before Emily had filed a restraining order against him 2 years ago. The one before that had moved across the country abruptly. And his college girlfriend had transferred schools mid-semester during their relationship. I also discovered that Marcus had been let go from his previous marketing job due to interpersonal conflicts with female coworkers. His current position was at a small firm owned by his father, a convenient arrangement that probably made it difficult for anyone to file complaints about his behavior. The viral photos had now been seen by over 1 million people, and local law enforcement had issued a statement saying they were looking into the matter. Domestic violence hotlines reported increased calls from people concerned about friends and family members. The wedding venue released a statement about implementing new protocols for recognizing signs of abuse. But Emily remained missing, and Marcus had hired a lawyer who issued a statement calling the viral photos misleading snapshots taken out of context and threatening legal action against anyone sharing them. The lawyer claimed Marcus and Emily were on a private honeymoon and would address the false accusations when they returned. I knew better. I knew my sister, and I knew she was in danger. The turning point came when I refused to let fear or Marcus's legal threats silence me. If my sister was in danger, and those viral photos proved she was, then I wasn't going to sit back and wait for authorities who moved too slowly, or lawyers who prioritized reputation over reality. I started my investigation by reaching out to Emily's closest friends from college, women she'd maintained relationships with, despite Marcus's obvious attempts to isolate her. What I discovered was a systematic campaign of control that had been building for months before their wedding. Sarah, Emily's former college roommate, revealed that Emily had confided in her about Marcus's jealousy and controlling behavior as early as 6 months into their relationship. He started questioning every friendship she had, Sarah told me, during a 2-hour phone conversation that left me nauseated. Emily said he would go through her phone, show up uninvited when she was out with friends, and make snide comments about how other men looked at her. But she kept making excuses for him, saying he was just protective because he loved her so much. Another friend, Jessica, shared screenshots of text conversations with Emily from earlier this year. The messages painted a picture of a woman gradually being cut off from her support system. Emily canceled on our girls' trip to Nashville, saying Marcus thought it was inappropriate for a soon-to-be married woman to party with single friends, Jessica explained. When I pushed back, she got defensive and said I didn't understand their relationship dynamic. But the most disturbing revelation came from Emily's work colleague Monica, who agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. Monica worked in the accounting department of Emily's law firm and had witnessed Marcus's behavior firsthand during office events. "Your sister started coming to work with bruises about 4 months ago," Monica said, quietly glancing around to make sure no one could overhear us. "At first it was just her arms, which she covered with long sleeves. Then it was her neck, hidden with scarves and high-collared shirts. When I asked her about it privately, she said she'd gotten clumsy, that she was bruising easily due to stress." Monica continued, but the real red flag was when Marcus started showing up at the office unannounced. He'd bring her lunch, which sounds sweet, but he'd sit there and monitor her interactions with male colleagues. He made everyone uncomfortable. Emily's boss actually had to speak with her about it because clients were commenting on the tension. Armed with this information, I realized the viral photos weren't isolated incidents, they were documentation of an escalating pattern of abuse that had been building for over a year. Marcus hadn't just uninvited me to their wedding, he'd systematically removed every person who might protect Emily or help her escape. This is where the story takes a turn that still gives me chills. If you're invested in seeing how Emily finally breaks free from Marcus's control, and trust me, the justice that's coming will restore your faith in karma, hit that like button and let me know in the comments what you would have done in my situation. Would you have gotten the police involved immediately, or would you have tried to find your sister first? Your engagement helps me know these stories matter to you, so don't forget to subscribe for more real-life drama with satisfying endings. I decided to take a more direct approach. Using my background in digital marketing, I started analyzing Marcus and Emily's online footprint for clues about where they might have gone. Credit card records were obviously off limits to me, but social media location tags, Google reviews, and even their shared Netflix account provided valuable intelligence. Marcus had a pattern of posting check-ins at upscale restaurants and hotels, usually on weekends. But more importantly, he had a habit of leaving detailed reviews for places he visited, often complaining about service or amenities. This narcissistic tendency to document every perceived slight turned out to be his downfall. I discovered that Marcus had recently left a scathing review for a luxury resort in the Pocono Mountains, complaining about incompetent staff and subpar accommodations for what he called his honeymoon suite. The review was posted just 4 days after the viral photos started circulating, which meant they were likely still there. But I wasn't going alone, and I wasn't going unprepared. I contacted Detective Sarah Martinez, who had been assigned to investigate the domestic violence allegations stemming from the viral photos. While she couldn't officially encourage civilian involvement, she didn't discourage me from sharing information that might help locate Emily. I also reached out to my brother Jake, who lived 2 hours away and had been equally worried about Emily's disappearance. Jake was a paramedic with training in crisis intervention, and he understood the danger Emily was facing better than most people. Marcus is escalating, Jake warned me during our planning conversation. The fact that he's isolated her completely and taken her away from familiar surroundings suggests he's either planning to seriously hurt her or he's preparing to run. Either way, Emily's in immediate danger. We developed a plan that prioritized Emily's safety while documenting everything for law enforcement. Jake would pose as a resort guest and try to locate their room number, while I would contact resort security with the viral photos and a missing person report. We also prepared a safety kit with Emily's medications. I knew she took anxiety medication and had severe allergies, comfortable clothes, and important documents I'd grabbed from her apartment using the spare key she'd given me years earlier. The drive to the Pocono Mountains felt endless, with my mind racing through every possible scenario. What if we were too late? What if Marcus had already moved her somewhere else? What if Emily refused to leave with us, too scared or too manipulated to accept help? But nothing prepared me for what we actually found when we arrived at the Mountain View Resort. The luxury retreat Marcus had described in his complaints looked more like a rundown motel from the highway, with peeling paint and a half-empty parking lot. This wasn't where someone would take their new bride for a romantic honeymoon. This was where someone would take a victim to a place where screams wouldn't be heard. Jake and I checked into the resort separately, maintaining the pretense that we were ordinary guests. The desk clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, seemed relieved to have customers who weren't complaining about everything. When Jake casually mentioned he thought he'd seen an old friend checking in, describing Marcus perfectly, she confirmed they were in room 237, the honeymoon suite at the end of the second-floor hallway. That gentleman's been nothing but trouble, she confided, clearly frustrated, complaining about everything, demanding refunds, making unreasonable requests. His wife seems sweet, though very quiet. Haven't seen much of her since they checked in. My blood ran cold. Emily, being described as very quiet, was the opposite of her normal personality. My sister was vibrant, talkative, someone who made friends with waiters and struck up conversations with strangers in elevators. If she was being quiet, it meant Marcus was controlling even her basic interactions. We waited until evening to make our move, knowing that confronting an abuser required strategy, not emotion. Jake positioned himself near the stairwell with a clear view of the parking lot, while I approached room 237 with Detective Martinez on speed dial and my phone set to record everything. The sound that greeted me when I pressed my ear to the door made my stomach drop. Emily was crying, the kind of broken sobbing that comes from someone who's been pushed beyond their breaking point. Marcus's voice followed, low and menacing, though I couldn't make out his exact words. I knocked firmly on the door. Emily, it's Rachel. I know you're in there, and I'm not leaving without you. The crying stopped abruptly. Footsteps approached the door and I heard the chain lock rattle. When the door opened, Marcus filled the doorway, his face a mask of false charm that didn't reach his eyes. Rachel, what a surprise. Emily and I are on our honeymoon, as you can imagine. This really isn't a good time for family visits. His tone was pleasant, but his body language was aggressive, positioned to block my view into the room. I need to see my sister Marcus. Now. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. Emily's not feeling well. The stress of all these ridiculous rumors online has really affected her. She needs rest, not drama from family members who couldn't respect her wedding wishes. That's when I heard Emily's voice, weak but unmistakable. Rachel, is that really you? Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the rage underneath. Emily's resting. You need to leave. No. I stepped forward, forcing him to either back down or physically block me. I'm not leaving without seeing my sister face to face. Emily, I'm here to take you home. What happened next unfolded in slow motion. Marcus grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise, hard enough to hurt, and tried to shove me backward. But Jake had been watching from the stairwell, and the moment he saw Marcus put hands on me, he was sprinting down the hallway. Get your hands off my sister, Jake's voice boomed through the corridor as he approached. Marcus released me immediately, his demeanor shifting to wounded innocence. I was simply trying to protect my wife's privacy. Your family seems to think they can barge into our honeymoon, and Emily, I called past him. I saw the photos, Em. Everyone's seen them. You don't have to protect him anymore. That's when Emily appeared in the doorway, and my heart broke completely. My beautiful, confident sister looked like a shadow of herself. She was wearing oversized clothes that couldn't quite hide the bruises on her arms and neck. Her hair, which she'd always worn long and styled perfectly, had been cut short and choppy, like someone had hacked at it with scissors. But it was her eyes that destroyed me, hollow, frightened, devoid of the spark that made Emily who she was. I can't, she whispered, glancing nervously at Marcus. I can't just leave. It's complicated, Rachel. You don't understand. Then help me understand, I said gently, pulling out my phone. Help me understand why your husband has been hurting you. Help me understand why you cut me out of your wedding so I wouldn't see what he was doing to you. Marcus stepped forward aggressively. You have no right to record this conversation. This is harassment, and I'm calling the police. Good, Jake replied calmly. Call them. I'm sure they'll be very interested in those viral photos and the missing person report that's already been filed. Emily's eyes widened. Missing person report, Em, you disappeared. Your work thinks you're on leave, your friends haven't heard from you, and those photos showed everyone exactly what Marcus is doing to you. People are worried. I'm worried. For the first time since opening the door, Emily looked directly at me instead of deferring to Marcus's reactions. In that moment, I saw my real sister flicker back to life, the woman who'd defended me from playground bullies, who'd driven 6 hours to help me move apartments, who'd held me when our grandmother died. The photos, she said slowly. People really saw them, over 1 million people, Em. And they're all asking the same question: where is Emily and is she safe? Marcus must have sensed his control slipping because his tone became desperately manipulative. Emily, sweetheart, you know how your family gets dramatic about everything. Remember what we discussed about their toxic behavior? This is exactly what I was protecting you from. But something had shifted in Emily's expression. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else: recognition. She was remembering who she used to be before Marcus systematically destroyed her sense of self. I want to go home, she said quietly. Then stronger, I want to go home, Rachel. Marcus's response was immediate and violent. He grabbed Emily's wrist and yanked her back into the room. You're not going anywhere. You're my wife, and you made vows. That was the moment Jake intervened, physically stepping between Marcus and Emily while I helped my sister grab her belongings. The confrontation that followed was brief but intense. Marcus, faced with witnesses and the reality that his control was crumbling, finally showed his true nature completely. "You think you can just take her?" he screamed, all pretense of civility. "Gone. She's nothing without me. Look at her, pathetic, weak, damaged. I made her into something better, and you want to drag her back into your dysfunctional family circus." Emily stopped packing and turned to face him. For the first time since I'd arrived, she stood up straight, and I caught a glimpse of the sister I remembered. "You cut my hair while I was sleeping," she said, her voice growing stronger. "You isolated me from everyone I loved. You made me uninvite my own sister to my wedding because you were afraid she'd see what you were doing to me. That's not love, Marcus. That's ownership." Getting Emily out of that hotel room was only the beginning. The real challenge was helping her reclaim her identity after months of psychological manipulation and physical abuse. We drove straight to the hospital, where Emily was treated for her injuries, and connected with a domestic violence counselor, who specialized in helping survivors of intimate partner abuse. The medical documentation was extensive and heartbreaking. Beyond the obvious bruises and cuts, Emily had stress fractures in her ribs from repeated impacts, a partially healed concussion that Marcus had convinced her was just a headache, and severe malnutrition from his control over her eating habits. The doctor who examined her said it was some of the worst systematic abuse she'd seen outside of trafficking cases. But the psychological trauma ran even deeper than the physical evidence suggested. During her first counseling session, which I attended for support, Emily revealed the full scope of Marcus's manipulation tactics. He had convinced her that our family was toxic and manipulative, that her friends were jealous of their relationship, and that she was mentally unstable and couldn't trust her own perceptions. "He would do things like move my keys and then act concerned when I couldn't find them," Emily explained to the counselor. "Or he'd change plans we'd made and then insist I had misremembered. After months of that, I started believing that I really was losing my mind." The wedding uninvitation, it turned out, had been Marcus's masterstroke of isolation. He'd convinced Emily that I disapproved of their relationship and would cause drama at their wedding. When Emily had resisted, he'd escalated to physical violence, then convinced her that the bruises were her fault for being difficult. "He told me that if I really loved him, I would choose him over everyone else," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "And when I did choose him, when I cut everyone out, he said it proved that no one else really cared about me anyway. It was a trap I couldn't win." Meanwhile, the viral photos had triggered a massive social media investigation that revealed Marcus's pattern of abuse across multiple relationships. His ex-girlfriend, who'd filed the restraining order, came forward with her own photos and documentation. Two other women shared their stories of psychological manipulation and physical violence. A former coworker revealed that Marcus had been fired from his previous job for stalking a female colleague. The district attorney's office, pressured by public attention and armed with overwhelming evidence, filed multiple charges against Marcus: domestic violence, unlawful imprisonment, stalking, and harassment. When police arrived to arrest him at the hotel, they found evidence that he'd been planning to take Emily even further away, possibly out of the country, to prevent her from seeking help. But Marcus had one final card to play, and it was more devastating than any of us had anticipated. 3 days after Emily's escape, his lawyer contacted us with what he called leverage. Marcus had been secretly recording Emily during their relationship, including intimate moments and private conversations where she'd expressed doubts about our family. He was threatening to release these recordings unless all charges were dropped. The violation of having her most private moments weaponized against her sent Emily into a spiral of shame and fear. She was terrified that people would judge her for staying with Marcus, for defending him to her friends, for the times she'd repeated his lies about our family being toxic. "I can't do this," she sobbed in my living room where she'd been staying since the hospital. "I can't have everyone see how weak I was, how stupid I was to believe him." That's when our family rallied in a way that reminded me why blood bonds matter. Our parents, who'd been devastated by being excluded from Emily's wedding, never once said "I told you so." Instead, they focused on supporting her healing. Jake took time off work to drive Emily to therapy appointments and legal meetings. Even our extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, Emily had lost touch with because of Marcus, reached out with love and support. The turning point came when Emily's therapist helped her reframe the narrative. "You weren't weak," the counselor explained. "You survived. Every day you stayed alive under those conditions was an act of strength. And when the opportunity came to escape, you took it. That's courage, not weakness." Emily decided to fight Marcus's threats. With the help of victim advocates and a prosecutor who specialized in domestic violence cases, we learned that Marcus's recordings were actually additional evidence of his stalking and harassment. In many states, recording someone without consent in private settings is illegal, especially when used for intimidation. More importantly, Emily realized that her story, including the parts she was ashamed of, could help other women recognize the signs of abuse before it escalated to the level she'd experienced. "He made me feel like I was going crazy," Emily said during an interview with a local news station that was covering the case. "But I wasn't crazy. I was being systematically broken down by someone who knew exactly what he was doing." If my story helps even one woman trust her instincts and get help earlier, then everything I went through will have meaning. The public response was overwhelming. Domestic violence hotlines reported increased calls from women who recognized their own relationships in Emily's story. The original viral photos, which had once represented Emily's trauma, became symbols of survival and the power of community intervention. Local organizations used Emily's case to train hotel staff, wedding vendors, and event coordinators to recognize signs of abuse and know how to respond appropriately. The resort where we'd found Emily implemented new protocols for guests who might be in danger. And Marcus, his carefully constructed facade crumbled completely under legal scrutiny and public attention. The recordings he'd threatened to use as leverage became evidence of his systematic abuse. His employer, his father's company, fired him to protect their reputation. His family, confronted with undeniable evidence of his behavior, cut contact rather than enable his abuse. 9 months after those viral photos first exposed Marcus's abuse, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison for domestic violence, stalking, unlawful imprisonment, and violation of privacy laws. The judge, a woman who'd clearly been moved by the case, delivered a statement that brought tears to everyone in the courtroom. "Mr. Davidson, you systematically destroyed another human being's sense of self, isolated her from everyone who loved her, and documented your abuse as if it were entertainment," Judge Patricia Williams said. "The evidence shows a pattern of behavior designed to break down Miss Emily's mental health and autonomy. This sentence reflects not only the crimes you committed against Miss Emily, but your pattern of abuse against multiple women." But the real justice wasn't just Marcus behind bars, it was watching Emily reclaim her life piece by piece. She'd started therapy immediately after escaping, working with specialists who understood the complex trauma of intimate partner abuse. The process was slow and sometimes painful, but Emily was determined to heal properly, rather than just survive. She moved into her own apartment, the first place she'd lived alone since college, and slowly began rebuilding relationships with friends and family. Some connections were easily restored, while others required more work to overcome the damage Marcus's manipulation had caused. Emily also found purpose in advocacy work. She began speaking at domestic violence awareness events, sharing her story to help other women recognize the warning signs of abuse. Her message was powerful because she didn't just focus on the obvious physical violence, she explained the subtle psychological manipulation that preceded it. "Abuse doesn't start with a punch," she would tell audiences. "It starts with isolation. It starts with someone convincing you that your instincts are wrong, that your friends and family don't understand your relationship, that you're lucky someone loves you despite your flaws. By the time the physical violence begins, you've already been conditioned to believe it's somehow your fault." The viral photos that had once represented Emily's worst nightmare became part of a traveling exhibition about domestic violence awareness. With Emily's permission, they were displayed alongside resources for abuse survivors and stories of hope and recovery. Emily also reconnected with her passion for law, specializing in family law, with a focus on representing domestic violence survivors in divorce and custody cases. She said that experiencing the legal system as a victim gave her insight into how to better advocate for other women in similar situations. The wedding industry, too, began implementing changes inspired by Emily's case. Photographers, vendors, and venue staff received training on recognizing signs of abuse and knowing how to intervene safely. Several major wedding websites added resources for brides who might be in abusive relationships. Our family dynamics also shifted in beautiful ways. Emily and I became closer than we'd ever been, bonded by the trauma we'd survived together, but also by a deeper appreciation for the love and support we'd taken for granted. Our parents, who'd been helpless to protect their daughter during her relationship with Marcus, channeled their energy into supporting other families dealing with similar situations. Jake left his paramedic job to become a victim advocate, inspired by Emily's courage and the realization that domestic violence intersects with many emergency situations he'd encountered in his medical career. As for Marcus, he became a cautionary tale. The viral photos and subsequent legal case were studied in criminal justice programs as an example of how social media could be used to document abuse and mobilize community intervention. His name became associated with the worst kind of intimate partner violence: systematic, calculated, designed to destroy rather than simply control. But perhaps the most meaningful justice was the simplest: Emily smiling again. Really smiling, not the desperate, frightened expression from those viral photos, but the genuine joy I remembered from our childhood. Watching her laugh with friends, pursue her career goals, and date again when she felt ready, all on her own terms, felt like the ultimate victory over Marcus's attempts to destroy her. Now, as I'm sharing this story with all of you, I can't help but think about the power of speaking up when something doesn't feel right. Those viral photos saved my sister's life because someone decided that Emily's safety was more important than privacy or politeness. That photographer, those social media users who shared the images, the thousands of people who commented with concern, they all played a part in Emily's rescue. So here's what I want to know from all of you watching: have you ever noticed signs that someone in your life might be in an abusive relationship? What stopped you from speaking up, and what would give you the courage to intervene? Emily's story shows that one person's decision to document and share what they witnessed can literally save a life. If this story moved you, if it reminded you to trust your instincts about the people you love, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories about real people overcoming impossible situations, because these stories matter and they save lives. And most importantly, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233, and there are people ready to help 24/7. You deserve love that doesn't hurt, and you deserve a life free from fear. Thank you for watching Emily's story, for caring about strangers on the internet, and for believing that everyone deserves to be safe in their own relationships. From our family to yours, I hope you never stop looking out for each other, and I hope you never stop believing that justice and healing are possible even after the darkest moments. Take care of yourselves and each other. See you in the next video.